Doug Mazeski.
Independence Day Special,
Part
Two Men and
two.
a Duck, Part 2.
Part 2.
And this special will be played before or around Independence Day with special guest Eric Battiger.
I think this part of the special is after.
I hope so. But either way, he has great stories of pastoral work, of hunting, fishing, outdoors, advice for families.
The most important thing, do you remember the question you left us with last week?
I do not remember the question, but I did enjoy his ticket story when he got a ticket in West Virginia. Welcome back to the third chair, week number 2 with Eric and Doug.
Thank you for that. Wonderful
Yay,
introduction.
Doug! Yeah.
Now, the big question is, we've been gone for a whole week. Do you remember the question you were going to ask?
I
Eric?
did. It was a serious question, and we don't mean to necessarily start the show so serious, but it's not just true in the church, but lots of organizations, kids organizations, Boy Scouts, organized sports. There seems to be a problem with adults sexually taking advantage of kids in these organizations. And I'm just wondering, what's your observation been? And from a pastor's point of view, what are some of the things that you stress in your church so that that's less likely to be a problem?
Yeah. First of all, let me say that the fallout from those kinds of things is very difficult.
Yes.
And it's very severe.
Mm-hmm.
And, sin is sin, and forgiveness can happen anywhere with anybody. But there are serious consequences of that. Jesus said, if you mess with one of my kids,
Mm-hmm.
you might as well have had a rock tied around your neck and thrown at the bottom of the ocean. Then what's going to happen to you?
Yeah.
So he takes that very seriously.
Yeah, like this will not end well for you.
This will not end well for you. And so abuse and things like that of children, we take very seriously at the church too.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I'm not a big policy guy. I know that they're necessary. Sometimes I look at policies and procedures as necessary evils, just because of the personality type that I am.
Mm-hmm.
But I see the necessity of it, and this I see very, very necessary, because policies like doing background checks on people and being very diligent about who works with your children, and very mindful of that is paramount now. You have to have it. And for one thing, if people, potential predators see that you have that, they won't even bother.
They want easy targets.
They want easy targets. They want soft targets, as they say in the security world. And so we try not to be a soft target. And we keep our heads on a swivel. We keep our eyes open. A lot of prayer, and our children's ministry is very, very diligent about that kind of thing. And so to make sure that it doesn't happen, because over the years in ministry, Peter, I've just dealt with too many people who've been on the receiving end of that, and if they're not so bitter and angry at God or at the church to even talk to me, I've had people that won't even talk to me because of it, and because of something that has happened to them. It's just it's a shame. It's a shame.
Now, the abuse of children, that's like the most horrible end of the spectrum, but there's also abuses of people in power with other adults.
Right. Oh yeah. And that's what I said about what advice would I give a young person to get a handle on the humility thing, and understand what God, asks and requires of us from a humility perspective, because power corrupts, and total power totally corrupts, as they say. And I think the more heady you get in ministry, and the more heady you get in a church, you can abuse people and push them around. And spiritual abuse is an actual thing.
Oh yeah, I call it spiritual rape.
Yeah,
I use a tough term. Yeah.
It's not good.
No. I mean, even here on our show, if we have lady guests, we always have another lady here. We just do.
Right.
And I think it takes away from the possibility of he said, she said stuff, and also too, it just shows that we're serious about not having anything happen to a guest. Yeah.
So we live in a culture, the whole Me Too thing, and whatever you think about all that, and the politics involved in that. The reality of the matter still is, that God wants to take care of, of people in general. And when you're in a position to take advantage of someone, whatever it is, if it's financial, or if it's, emotional, you're taking advantage of somebody or manipulating somebody through, we see the scriptures all the time, people using scriptures and guilt as a motivator and things like that. If you have to use those techniques, guilt and whatnot, to get, whatever your objective or your mission is done, then you're not a very good leader.
Yeah, I agree in that, and you're right. That can. I remember one pastor telling me one time that you need to be involved in one major and two minor ministries. It's like I don't have time to go to work if I do that. I do that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Once people start to volunteer, sometimes they ask and ask, and I think the key is. Sometimes you just say no, because I have my family. Like you said, you guys can't leave your family.
Right.
You had 4 kids, and you had to be, I can't remember the term you used, but you had to be very direct. You had to concentrate on that.
Intentional,
Intentional, and I think that's a great term.
Sometimes deciding that ahead of time rather than at the moment is a lot better.
Right.
It's like, okay, I can do 2 hours a week of volunteer work, but please, if you don't stay and shovel the dog poop, the dogs will suffer. It's like, I've done my 2 hours. I've already decided.
And there's a balance to everything.
There's a balance there,
because Henry Cloud and those guys that wrote the Boundaries books and all of that. I think there's an element of that goes crazy. Boundaries gone crazy, I call it. That they won't do anything for anybody because they've got all these boundaries, so they become very selfish. That's not what those guys, Townsend and Cloud, when they wrote that material, intended at all. So proper boundaries are good, obviously. But
Jesus didn't do everything for everybody. He didn't just walk around opening McDonald's and feeding 10,000 everywhere he went.
But he lived a pretty sacrificial life. We have to say that.
He did.
So there is a balance to all that, and we are not Jesus. I understand that. We're not God. There's only so much that we can do, but we can do something.
Oh, absolutely. So one last question for me, then Doug is going to ask you a couple of questions, and that is, do you have a particular strategy? Suppose someone comes to you and they say, I'd like to be more consistent with my prayer life or my Bible reading. What kinds of advice to give people that are interested in those spiritual disciplines?
I get that asked all the time. The first thing that I always go to is, well, why? Why do you want a more consistent devotional life or a more consistent Bible reading life? If I can get to
my wife, you don't understand what happens if I don't knock off a chapter a day.
You get it, huh?
Yeah, Doug, can we edit that out?
No, I'll replay that
over and over and over again.
I'll go on loop for a while.
Okay, so if you don't have a wife that's pulling you accountable, how do you do that? But anyway, the reason I ask that is that because motivation is what's going to change somebody.
Sure.
And again, if you're doing it because your church is, you're not a good Christian unless you spend 30 minutes a day, reading the Bible and another 30 minutes in prayer and so forth.
Well, your church is tough. Ours only has 15.
There you go.
I've done that.
If you're a real church, no, just kidding.
I've done this like read the Bible in a year, and I end up focusing more on just getting through things so I can tick off the boxes for the day.
Right.
That I've missed the point of trying to appreciate the purpose of reading.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now I will say though that there is some good and benefit to having a plan and a strategy.
Oh, I agree totally.
And checking the box. There's some good to that because some days we're just not motivated. Sometimes we don't want to, but if we do it just because, then I think God still rewards that. But overall, what's your motivation? What do you get out of? So, our love for Christ needs to be addressed, our desire to grow closer to Him. What does it mean when the scriptures say, I want you to walk in step with the Spirit? And so we show people what they're going to get out of the spiritual disciplines, even fasting and prayer and Bible reading and being in connection with God's people. All of those things, you got to show the results. What are you going to get out of this? And the rewards that come from that has to be has to be addressed from the very beginning, as opposed to just arm twisting and you're not a real Christian unless you do have this read these books and do this and do that. So
yeah, that's good. That's good. Go ahead, Doug.
Well, we're going to talk about your family growing up. So think about them during this break.
Okay.
Oh, we're going to go to a break.
Break.
Welcome back to the third chair. Tell us about your family growing up, and you started in West Virginia.
I started in West Virginia. I was born in Morgantown. We moved to Pennsylvania for a little bit, just for a short time, then back to West Virginia, Fairmont, West Virginia. That's where I grew up as a little kid. And we lived in a little town outside of Fairmont called Barrackville for a while. I ran around the woods. Then we moved into town, and Fairmont was a town of 25,000 people. And I had 3 siblings and an older brother and 2 younger sisters. And man, I think I had somewhat of a Huck Finn childhood. Was just running around. And
what did your dad do?
my dad was an engineer, he was a mechanical engineer. So he worked building coal mining equipment back in West Virginia, and did a lot of that, and actually traveled up and down in some of the mountain states, the Appalachian mountain states where the coal mines were, and took us kids every once in a while with him. So experienced that. And
how did you end up in Wyoming?
well, about the time I was in junior high, my dad changed direction and took another job with above ground mining, strip mining, in Wyoming, where his company built the coal storage silos, which are 250, 300 feet tall. The train drives under them, so a lot of the trains that you see here in Colorado Springs full of coal have come from places like Wyoming and Montana, and the mines up there.
Dump the coal in.
They just drive underneath them. It's all computerized. And so we went there, he built those, and then he got another job when that work was done in Denver. And so we moved to Parker. I ended up graduating high school in Castle Rock. That's where I finished up my school, and then went to college in Nebraska, and eventually made it back to
Where in
seminary.
Nebraska?
Norfolk, Nebraska, a small school, doesn't even exist anymore. And then I went to a seminary in Cincinnati, Ohio.
That doesn't exist.
That doesn't exist anymore. And
So what do you do at these schools? Did
I don't know.
this have to do with you?
Oh my goodness.
But anyway, we shut them down. Good thing. No, I had 2 very good schools for me. I enjoyed both of them, and learned a lot. But growing up, we grew up in a Christian home, and always believed. My dad was kind of I say a large and in charge type of guy. And my mom and he divorced when I was about 12, and I struggled with that a little bit. That divorce, he remarried to a lady that eventually kind of became my stepmom. She became a second mom to us. She was very good to us, and finished raising us. And my mom, however, struggled with life. She became an alcoholic, and died an alcoholic. And I don't know that I handled that real well. As a young man, I was an adult by the time that all happened. But we did have a relationship, and she did give her life to Christ later on in the year, but just couldn't beat the alcohol thing, and struggled with that. And but my dad also he wasn't a real, when I was young, strongly committed Christian, lived somewhat of a dualistic lifestyle. We would go to church on Sunday, but there was a lot of his life was living like hell the rest of the week. And I watched that, and I thought that's the way it's supposed to be. So as a teenager, I wasn't necessarily a real rebellious teenager or anything, but I'd go to church on Sunday, and youth group even, and do all the things you do in church. But the rest of the time as a teenager, I did everything everybody else did. And it wasn't until in between my junior and senior year, I went to Germany as an exchange student and met a young lady there. We kind of had a relationship, as girlfriend and boyfriend. She was visiting another family in Germany. I was visiting another family. But we stayed in contact, and she was a strong Christian. And she really challenged that. And I got to thinking about it when I got home. Go ahead.
So you're coming into your senior year.
Yeah, I'm coming into my senior year. We had moved from Wyoming down to Parker, Colorado, where I was going to school, like I said, in Castle Rock. And so I had a fresh start. I didn't have to be with my old friends. And so I'd been thinking about what this gal had basically shared with me and challenged me to live a different kind of life, a fully committed life to Jesus. And that senior year, I worked through that and did that, and ended up going to Bible college
in
Nebraska. And I didn't even know what a Bible college was. Had a friend who said, "Hey, I'm going to go visit the school that I'm going to go to school to. You want to come along with me?" Because we had to drive from here, Colorado Springs or Parker, to all the way to Nebraska, and he didn't want to do it by himself. My dad let me do it, so I drove up there with him. I ended up going to school there. He didn't. I don't even know what happened to him, actually. But then I went to school, and I thought, this is pretty cool. I'll just go here for a year and study the Bible, because I was really growing in my faith. And the Lord had different plans. I ended up staying 4 years, met my wife there, we got married, and I said, now I have a Bible college degree, what do I do? And I wanted to be a missionary. And because one of my professors was a missions professor, and he did 3 tours in Vietnam as a Green Beret, Special Forces.
Wow.
But he was a Christian, and when he came back, he was a missionary. The Cold War was going on. He worked with an organization to help get materials into the Soviet bloc countries and so forth like that, and help get guys out who were in trouble with
because
the
of
communists.
religion,
Yes,
yeah.
because of their faith. And so this guy totally inspired me, and I said, I want to be like him. And that's what I wanted to do. That was my dream. And so we got hooked up with a mission organization, my wife and I, as newly married, and they said, well, you need some experience in ministry first. And so we went to work at a church, back to Wyoming actually, to some folks that I knew there, and got us hooked up there. And so we spent some time there. That didn't go so well. I struggled a little bit with that. Some of it was my fault. I think some of it was the deal with the church. And so I actually said, I don't want to do this. I told my wife, I don't want to do this.
Didn't want to be a pastor.
Didn't want to be a pastor. Didn't want to be a pastor. So, well, what do you want to do? I want to be a pilot. So I started taking pilot lessons.
Oh.
And but as a young man in college, somewhere along the line, I started developing severe migraine headaches. And I found out that flying up and down altitude changes just kind of exacerbated that.
Made you miserable.
Yeah,
Made
that's
it
not
miserable.
surprising,
And a church had called me down here in Colorado Springs and said, hey, we need somebody to substitute for us. And so I substituted for them. And then make a long story short there, the pilot thing didn't work out, and they asked me to come be their preacher. And so I got back into ministry at a small church here in Colorado.
So you're like an itinerant preacher?
I was, just kind of helping them out.
Did you ride a horse?
I didn't, but I could have. But that little church saved my ministry. I really would believe that they just loved on me, and I've been in the ministry ever since.
What did you go to Cincinnati? Was it after?
It was after that church. I said, this is what I want to do. I feel called, but I really want to get some more schooling. So I went to graduate school in Cincinnati.
And then you still, after going to Cincinnati, you still could have been a missionary.
I still could have. There's another story. You want to hear that?
Yeah.
That's an interesting part of our story.
You've got 2 minutes.
I've got 2 minutes.
No, we could take a break during this thing.
All right, let's just start.
Don't pressure our guests.
Well, I'll
No
start.
pressure.
I'll start because I think it's going to take more than 2 minutes.
Yeah, go for it.
I was really still wanting to do this, and still wanting to go to the mission field, but the mission organization said it's about time for you to go, and but we need to do some things to continue to prepare you, and one of them is to go get a psychological exam, basically. So we had to go see a psychologist. At the time they used a guy in Chicago, so they sent us to Chicago to this
Bob
guy.
Newhart.
Yeah, Bob Newhart. Stop it.
We were talking about him earlier today.
No, it wasn't Bob Newhart. It was another guy who was a real psychologist, and he put us through a battery of tests. It took a couple days. and interviews and talks and so forth. And then towards the end of it, he was asking us some questions, and my wife just breaks down into this almost uncontrollable sobbing. And so me and the doc are just looking at her like, okay, what's this about? And she finally gets a hold of herself, and she just says, I don't want to go to Africa, and I don't want to live in a mud hut and be a missionary, raise my kids there. You know, and I'm just kind of
a damper on the whole thing, doesn't it?
Got to put a damper on things. But she got a hold of herself. The doctor finished the interview and so forth and talked to her. And my wife's a very strong, independent lady. And he gave his report to the mission organization. Said these people are fine. She's got some things she's got to work through, but she'll be fine. And,
so we're gonna continue
we'll finish
this
it later.
story after this break.
Yeah. But I have a hint. I know how this ends.
Yes, I think you do.
No spoilers.
No spoilers. Doug, most of our viewers and followers know that our new episodes come out on YouTube on Thursday nights.
Right.
But we have a new announcement about the third chair.
Exciting announcement.
Starting with the older episodes, they're now going to be on a TV channel.
Yes, very exciting.
So the TV channel is with the Pikes Peak Library District, Comcast Channel 17 here in Colorado Springs. And I believe the episodes are going to play at 7 o'clock at night, but they may cycle them, and who knows, maybe they'll be on at 2 or 3 in the morning. So if you're in Colorado Springs and you have Comcast and access to Channel 17, you're able to watch The Third Chair. The episodes are edited a little bit shorter. Some of the commercials are taken out on TV.
It should be exciting.
Yeah, I can finally tell my friends I'm really on TV.
We could tell them we're TV stars.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm going with
Welcome
Ballinger.
back to
or Derringer. Derringer, like the gun.
that'll work.
starts with a B.
I know.
Welcome to the third chair as we discuss Eric's last name.
It's available on the website.
So tell me, Eric, when you proposed to your wife, what did she think about you having of changing her name to?
She was fine with it. She was so in love with me, she didn't care. I think that she was going to get difficult. Isn't that a good answer?
Yeah, that was good. But what about when you were going to make her go to Africa?
Yeah, that's a whole different story.
Okay, let's go back to Africa. So,
Which, man, guys, this is kind of a bigger, depending on what direction we want to go.
Whatever way you want to go.
I went to Bible college because I thought it would be interesting, not because I had a calling to be a minister. And so, by the end of it, like I said, we need to go into ministry because I have a Bible college degree. I think I choose, the mission field because I love adventure. I want to, I don't want a picket fence and a lawn to mow and all that. I want to go do stuff. I want to be outdoors, Africa. We were all set to work with the Maasai in Kenya.
Oh, nice.
And then we had that episode that I shared in the last segment about, meeting in the psychologist's office. And so we came home and we worked through some of that, and she was ready to go, and she'd follow me anywhere, and there's no doubt that we would have been fine. But I didn't want to get 3, 4, 5 years into it and then for her to be miserable. And a lot of guys in the ministry, you were talking about family a little bit ago, or maybe that was last week you were talking about it, you just do it because dad says, and God's call on dad's life. And I know, missionaries have been kind of guilty of that, like, Mom, you got to follow along because you're the submissive wife, and the kids got to go whether they want to or not because God's telling dad to go. Well, I struggle a little bit with that. I want to say, was that really God or was that you? And so after a lot of prayer and talking with my wife and so forth, I said, if God's not calling you, then I don't think he's calling me. There must be something else going on here. So we ended up not going. I stayed in local ministry, which is exactly what I didn't want to do. But God rewarded that over the years. We had several ministries, and they all went well. Like I said, I have no horror stories of anything, and the churches have always treated us very well, and so forth. and I've enjoyed it and done well at it. But there was always this little part of me that kind of held that against my wife. Like, you didn't let me go do my thing. It was your fault. And didn't quite say it that way, but, that would be some ammo I would pull out, if we ever had a discussion that wasn't going my way.
Oh, wow.
I'm not ashamed. I'm ashamed of that. I'm not proud of that. I'm just
You're
confessing.
very
okay?
honest. Yeah.
And so I kind of, went back to that guilt thing. Would make my wife feel guilty about that, and so forth. And but not enough to let's go to the mission field now. But I did a lot of short-term stuff. I've visited missionaries that our churches have supported all over the world. I've been to Africa and points beyond. So I was blessed in that way. But still, there was this part of me. That's what I want to do. I don't know if you guys have seen the documentary "Free Burma Rangers."
I've heard of that. Steve Coe on our show talked about the Free Burma Rangers because there's a civil war going on.
Yeah. And I watched that guy.
Myanmar, now.
I watched that guy and I go, man, that could have been me. It could have been me.
Steve Cole's going over Burma quite a few times.
Oh, yeah.
And he's been retired.
Yeah.
I mean, he's did this after he worked for Boeing for a year. He tried to be a minister because people said, well, you should be a minister.
And after some Bible school, he figured out
no, that's not me. I need to be
Yeah.
in the mission field. So he had the opposite problem.
But I mean, then he went back to Boeing.
Sure.
And then after he retired, he's been in the mission field and has done a lot of good work.
And that's the point I was getting to, is that maturity comes from evaluating a call like that and seeing, is this me? What is this, Lord? And really, I think a lot of people say the Lord told me, and they use that phraseology way too lightly. And so I've always been very cautious about that kind of language in Christianity, because it can be flippant, it can be thrown around, and God doesn't take too kindly of people talking on His behalf when He didn't say something. There's some Old Testament scriptures that say don't do that, basically.
Yeah, like if you're a prophet and you get it wrong, we saw you in half.
Take you out of the city and stone you. So I think it's a very serious thing to say the phrase, the Lord told me. So I began to wonder, was this really the Lord? And to make some of this story shorter, basically I got to a point where the Lord convicted me. Eric, you didn't want to go to Africa because you loved the Maasai so much. You wanted to go to Africa because you loved adventure. And I wasn't going to let that happen. And so that, a series of events happened to get me to that point, but that required me apologizing to my wife for all the times that I thought I was making her feel guilty for not allowing me to go fulfill my dream that God had given me, and God had nothing to do with it. So that's one of those things that, again, we talked about last week about making an apology for mistakes you've made. That was a mistake that I made.
That's a really important lesson.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with everyone.
Yeah.
And also too, just I think if we get a kind of response like that from our spouse, we really need to stop and pause. Right. It's like, we don't need to rush now because something ain't right.
And I've seen too many couples get into ministry, whether it's the mission field or a located ministry or a parachurch organization, and one of them just isn't 100%. And they think by grit and by, I'm going to do this.
But it's hard to have that kind of grit. If you're on a 3-year mission, 3 years is a long
It's a long time. And you're raising your kids over there, and your parents back home getting older, and there's just all kind of dynamics. You to make that work, you have to be called. Both have to be called. And that's the same in ministry, in church ministry too. If one person is doing it just because they feel like they have to, or God has called their partner but not them, and they're married them, and they got to do it, and those stories very seldom turn out good.
Yeah, and it's preventable.
It's preventable.
Yeah, I mean, you it may be an uncomfortable conversation, but you have the conversation before you sign on the dotted line.
And working at Boeing isn't the end of the world. It's a mission field.
Yeah,
totally.
That's true.
It's a mission field. Everywhere you go is a mission field, and pressuring somebody into full-time ministry may be a huge mistake.
Yeah, and I think it's just people, and I don't think they were doing it, on purpose. It's just like, "Oh, you should be a minister," because he
Right.
was doing a lot with the church.
Yeah, he was doing a lot of lay teaching and stuff, and people
Yeah,
were
they
saying,
said,
"Oh,
"Wow, your
oh yeah,
knowledge
he'd
is
make
so
a great
good."
pastor."
But
Yeah.
isn't that what the church is called to do? Is
Yeah,
to take these guys,
yeah.
working
Yeah.
at Boeing and IBM or whoever, working at Walmart,
Mhm.
and saying, Peter said, you are a royal priesthood, a holy people set apart for God's glory, and to declare His praises. And so it doesn't matter where you're at. You're a priest. You're a minister. It doesn't matter.
But come on, most of us people that are members of the church, we expect the pastor to do all the
Right.
Yeah, Peter and I, we had a church. Our pastor, had personal problems, so we lost him, and it took us 9 months, and it was Peter and I running the church. talk about a poor church.
it was a good experience for us.
I mean, it was a good experience
So
for us.
sobering. It was so. It was very serious, but we also laughed a lot because otherwise we would have gone crazy.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
boy.
boy.
They said, well, the church was a failure. But Peter told one of the reasons. We had another young man who he lost his church failed, and he came to our church and he said, I'm not going to do anything, just sit in the back and listen. And then a couple times he did small things, and then one time our pastor got in a car accident and couldn't make it, and so he ran it, and then he started to get very interested, and he's back preaching again.
There you go.
And it's like, our small church, we didn't stay too long, but we helped some people.
Yeah, I don't think we should ever. It's hard to judge whether a work has been successful or not. I mean, God does the craziest things. Have a work going for a while, and we think, oh, it only lasted a year, but we don't know the half of behind the scenes.
Yeah, and metrics and measurement of success in today's American Western church is, it's pretty narrow. It's it's nickels and noses, really.
Missions reports, how many converts,
exactly,
how much money came, that kind of thing.
And there's validity, some validity to that. We have to see movement. We have to see the gospel being.
Yeah, if the report says like 0.00, then maybe there's a problem there too.
But we also can't discount what God is doing behind the scenes when those numbers don't look the way we want them to. So
yeah, I am absolutely positively sure that most of the time I have no idea.
The Covenant is saying this: we will not discuss numbers when we come back after this break.
Hi, I'm Peter from Pikes Peak Recovery Coaching, and as you know, I do help people with drug and alcohol recovery issues. I love to help people get better, but I also offer a variety of other services, including regular life coaching services. I've helped several people write and finish a book. I've helped a doctor that was in medical school graduate and then get into a residency. And I also actually have quite a background in mathematics, and I do some math tutoring for the GED as well as the ASVAB for those that are thinking about a career in the military. So my contact information is on the screen. Please send me an email or a text, and we can talk about some of these services and how I can help. That's Peter Grigg at Pikes Peak Recovery Coaching. Welcome back to the third chair. We're here with our guest, Eric. Thank you for being here, Eric. And Doug, of course. We're going to switch it up here just a little bit. Let's talk about leadership. Now, I know you've been a senior pastor, or I don't know if it's a vice president type pastor, but, high level of leadership a long time. Is there one or two either leadership styles or books on leadership that has profoundly affected you over the years, and you can't say the Bible. Okay.
Besides the Bible.
Besides the Bible, yeah.
I think what in the past, just in my observation, the past 20, 25 years, the church has done a good job of filtering through secular leadership, taking out the stuff that's not applicable or not any good, and applying the stuff that is. And we've had a lot of different leadership movements over the years that have helped us do that. And I think one of the guys that does that really well is a guy in Oklahoma by the name of Greg Rochelle. He does that. He lives and breathes leadership and has helped for Christians to decipher some of that stuff and to make it more applicable to church leadership and to Christianity in general. But guys like Patrick Lencioni in the business world have done a good job of just applying.
He did like the death by meeting or something.
Yeah, he's a kind of a funny guy. He's very witty and
the
so
five
forth.
The five dysfunctions of a team. Yeah.
And so he's very big on team and relationship and the just the humanity part of leadership.
Sure.
And so I appreciate a lot of those guys in the secular world have kind of taught us in the church as opposed to being just a dictator and say so because I'm the pastor type of leadership that we've seen in churches before. That goes back to some of that abuse that we talked about earlier. So I think things like relationship and leadership and teamwork and learning people, understanding your people, and putting them where they belong and where they need to be, as God has gifted them, and helping them figure that out. So
that's good. I have a personal theory on things about when the equivalent, either volunteers or employees, don't do well. Leaders can have the tendency of blaming them when often the problem really is the leader, not either training them, teaching them, supporting them, encouraging them, all those thems.
Yeah. Well, a guy that's done a lot of leadership training in the church world that you may be familiar with is John Maxwell.
Oh yes.
And one of the things that he says all the time is that if you think you're leading but nobody is following, you're just out taking a walk.
That's
you do like to hike, right?
Yeah, like to hike. But if you turn around, nobody's there. Guess what?
And that's true too. Even if you're not in official leadership position,
right.
If you have people following you, then you're still a leader.
Right. A lot of people don't realize that too. Well, I don't have leadership, and then you could look at just about any church and do some research and find out who the leaders are, and they may not be the people you expect. Maybe a lady playing the piano or something.
Yeah, exactly. There's always surprises that way.
One of the things I taught about leadership is if you're coming in a new situation, you're supposed to be a leader. First thing you should do is look to see who is the leader there.
Right. Who are the real leaders? There's positional leadership, and then there's real leadership. There's functional leadership.
Yeah. And you need to figure. That's the first thing you need to do is figure that out.
Right. Exactly.
You don't want to get them mad and then
right. You need to find out who are the influencers, and
and
that's really what leadership is too. Is influence, is helping people make decisions, helping people change their lives for the better, and helping them help other people. And creating that, what I call the 2-2-2 principles from 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2.
Oh, wow, the 2-2-2.
Yeah, where Paul said, the things you've heard and seen in me, I want you to put into practice, and I want you also to trust that to faithful men who will be able to entrust it to further faithful men. So that's the progression of leadership. It's not just running the show, it's teaching people how to do things, how to live life, and then so that they can share that with other people.
So because Paul was training the trainer.
Yeah, well,
exactly.
and if a senior pastor is doing it all, studies show that you'll never be able to grow above a church of 100.
Yeah.
It's at that point he burns out.
Counselors call that enabling.
Yeah. Well, and the other big difference, of course, is the difference between a manager and a leader.
Right.
A manager might be able to put together great shift schedules and,
Sure.
and there's a place for managers, don't get me wrong, but that's not the same as leading.
Good managers, they say, good managers do things right, and good leaders do the right things. So there's a difference there.
Yeah, there is. But you need bean counters. You need good policies and procedures and people that enact that. I mean, that is an integral part.
Right.
Mm-hmm. There's a hand, different parts of the body, so to speak. So, speaking of different parts of the body, let's talk about what kind of music you like to listen to.
That's a great segue. I didn't understand it at all.
Yeah, I didn't either. Whatever.
Well, country
Peter,
and western.
I'm glad you work hard to make sense.
I just don't get the respect.
I think everybody likes something different. That's where you're going with that.
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
Country and western, there's a dog involved.
Yes, a dog and a truck. And I do like country western music.
So how far back, where do you draw the line? Is Shania Twain country enough
Yes,
for you?
she is. But I'm not quite, Hank Williams Jr. and that's a little bit further. When I was a kid in the 70s, so I'm kind of a classic rock guy too.
Oh, I am a classic rock guy too.
But somewhere along the line, I got into country music as a young adult, and so Garth Brooks, that era, the guys that were bringing country back.
So you don't like the Hank Williams Jr. Do you want to play some football?
No. Well, yeah, that's a cool song. That is a cool song. That is a very cool song. But yeah, and now it's Tim McGraw. He seems to be a timeless guy that just keeps hanging in there and reinventing himself and doing a good job.
So what about books that you enjoy to read? Do you do recreational reading, or is it all pretty much for the job?
Yes and no. And like I said, I do a lot of nature reading and books about nature, both secular and Christian, and enjoy that. That's kind of my recreational reading. Books that have kind of had a significant impact on me. I suppose that the biggest one in the last 20 years was John Eldridge, some of his stuff. Wild at Heart, when I read Wild at Heart,
I related to that. And the one, The Beauty for the Women, what was it called?
Captivating.
Captivating.
He and his wife wrote together. But anyway, there's a lot of stuff that he writes. He has a little bit different perspective on Christianity that I think a lot of church guys and pastor guys kind of resist. And there's some stuff that I don't agree with him 100%, but the reclaiming of a man heart and the masculine heart that he introduced to a lot of people, through a best-selling book called Wild at Heart, was really significant for me, and kind of got me on this journey of my love for the wild and wild things and nature and wild places, and seeing God in all of that. Was really kind of started. That was kind of the genesis of reading that book. Made a huge difference.
Yeah, very much so. I felt like it was a little bit in response to the idea that perhaps the idea of being masculine was being feminized too much.
Right.
Almost a pushback on that somewhat. Yeah. Now, what about things like C.S. Lewis or
of course,
Tolkien?
I've read some classics like that, and Mere Christianity and all of that have had an influence on me over the time. I'm not a real good reader, so I have to take a lot of time. I love the invention that we came up with called Audible.
You like to listen to your audiobooks.
So do sometimes you listen to your books and then sometimes to your music? Or
Yes,
does that work out?
Exactly.
When you hike, do you do headphones?
I do, but another great invention are earbuds.
Earbuds.
A Bluetooth earbud, so I can have one in my one ear when I listen to a book, and I can hike and do stuff outdoors and still hear what's going on around me.
Oh, I thought for sure
stand
you were
there.
going to
You
say you
don't
got
wanna
Hank Williams Jr. in one ear and Tolkien in the other going at the same time.
No.
Well, that would be impressive.
That would be impressive. And so besides books, you like to do all the outdoor stuff, hiking, fishing, hunting. When we come back, we'll ask you the question, if you actually shoot something, does the hard work start after you've shot it?
Yes. That's the short answer.
Yeah.
Yes.
We'll have a longer answer when we come back.
A longer answer when we come back. Hi, Peter and Doug here from The Third Chair. We're looking for a win-win situation. We want to keep these videos put up on a weekly basis, and we want to help you succeed with your business adventure.
And we've brought up as a show a lot of important issues that people are interested in, and we brought up a lot of local actors and artists and bringing them forward, which helps them as well as our audience members in finding some of these things.
So there is an email on the screen. Send us a note if you're interested in knowing about some of our sponsorship packages. Welcome back to the third chair with Doug and Eric. And we were talking last segment about the process when you hunt. I've heard the expression after you shoot the animal, say it's a big elk. That's when the real work begins. What does that expression mean for us that aren't hunters?
Well, I would answer that yes and no, because there's a lot of work that goes into hunting beforehand.
Sure.
There's scouting, there's preparation, there's physical conditioning if you're serious, depending on how serious you are and what type of hunting you're doing. So there's a lot of work that goes on beforehand.
Fair point.
And but the actual harvesting of an animal, once the animal is down and you've got it down, then that phrase comes from the fact that you got to get it into your freezer.
I assume you're not out in the middle of nowhere like in a golf cart that you could just sort of load the animal up.
No, and again, it depends on, there's all kind of hunting here in Colorado. Most of the hunting I do is in wilderness areas, so we're usually several miles away from a road of any kind. And so you can hire a horse, you can take your own horse, you can, take it out on your back, which I've done.
So would you do like
how much does an elk weigh?
Oh, there's, you'll have, several hundred pounds of meat by the time if you bone it out. Bone it out means take it off the bone. You leave, leave the bone and the innards and everything else, the hide there, and you'll have several hundred pounds of meat to get out of there. So
wow.
So to carry it out, you need a few people.
Yeah, and a quarter. It's a quarter. Basically, you can take a quarter. That's a lot of meat. And so it's a minimum of 4 trips, if not more.
Wow.
For one person to do it.
Wow.
So
yeah, that
depending
is.
on how many miles you have to go.
And then like elk, for instance, I've eaten deer. Does elk taste like deer? Is it gamey or what's it?
And again, it depends on a lot of conditions. People say that all tastes gamey, but it depends on how you field dress it, if you take care of it properly. And get it dried out properly and cooled down properly. There's just a number of factors involved in all of that.
I'm sure you've eaten elk.
Good.
Oh, I'm sure I've had elk, yeah. And I'm sure I've had elk
He
jerky.
has, because I've made enough chilies.
He's put elk in it, yeah. And
it always makes Doug's wife nervous. What kind of meat is actually in this chili this time?
Eating at our house is the same way. You never know.
Yeah.
Antelope, deer, elk. We have it all.
That sounds great. That sounds great. I remember one year my wife said bring home some beef, so I brought home a half a side of cow in a brand new freezer.
There you go.
Surprised her, yeah.
That'll work
like
too.
There you have you have a year of steaks in the
There
freezer.
you
Yeah, boy. And do you have special recipes like if you're going to do elk?
There are, and every once in a while I'll do something. My wife will ask me to cook something up special, but typically we do a lot of hamburger, and she's just learned to. She's learned to just do her normal cooking with it. So
if you get an elk, is it like having like a steer? Are you able to do roasts and steaks? And some of it is there like a filet mignon section?
Yeah, there is. There's a filet mignon section, and so there's tenderloin.
How do you like your elk?
So exactly, it's just like a beef. It's just like a cow, and there's all kind of ways to cut it up, and I do them all my own. I'm not a butcher, but I do all my own. I've never paid to have an animal processed, and
because most of them do get it done, and they'll get to take it in. They say, "Oh, this guy didn't cut it right."
But if I don't cut it right, it's my fault. So,
so I know you're going to be involved with summer camps this year. Will there be like elk on the menu? Will you be like wheeling up several hundred pounds of elk for the kids?
You never know.
This hamburger tastes funny. Eat your elk burger.
Eat your elk burger. Exactly.
So, tell us how people can get a hold of you either at your church or information for your camp.
The best way is through all of our websites, the renew72.com, campcomo.com, and sunnysidechristian.com. Those are the best way to get a hold of us. So
nice. And suppose somebody just wanted to talk to you. Is there a way, as one of the pastors, that there's a process for making an appointment?
Yeah, sure. And it's just very simple. Just contact me through the website. I have my email on there. But it's Eric at sunnysidechristian.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being here for 2 weeks.
Thank you so much. This is a lot of fun.
Oh, well.
You guys are hilarious.
Well, thank you. Yeah. The next time we'll have you on again after the next elk season's over.
Yeah. We'll be having a buffet right
a
here.
buffet of elk. Yes.
We'll
you
try
go.
the different parts of the elk to see
Yeah.
which parts we like the best.
Yeah. Oh, this fillet is so delicate.
Oh, it is.
Well, thank you. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll know when we've uploaded another episode. From 2 Men and a Duck Entertainment and The Third Chair, we'll see you next week.
This has been The Third Chair.